Hi everybody, happy 4th of July early. This is lesson 9, data analysis. Yay! Everybody loves stats, right? This is where we're going to work on this section of your methods, the methods section, in your dissertation proposal. So this is where you're going to be taking that information that you learned last year in your stats class and applying it to how you're going to answer your research question. So I know that Dr. Moore has set you up very well and has given you a ton of resources, so this is going to be great. So here's where you're going to look to see what kind of statistical analysis you need to do to answer your research question. So you're going to look at what type of descriptive stats you're going to be obtaining, and then also what type of inferential statistical analysis will be important for your research question. All right, so you've got your resources here. You've got chapter 12 in Cantrell and McKenzie, but it's not the entire chapter. You've got the pages there listed for you. You've got the book chapter with Patton to help out with some statistical questions, and then the Pollitt and Beck chapter. Also, you have some really great resources with SPSS manual and the textbook. I know that I referred back to it often while I was developing this section of my dissertation proposal. So you do have an assignment this week. This is where, again, you're going to be writing out a data analysis subsection for your method section. And so again, like we talked about, you're going to be figuring out what type of statistical analysis you need to perform to answer your question. So you really want to start at the beginning. So you're going to be getting descriptive statistics, right? So how are you going to define or show the reader like who's part of your study? You know, it's the age, all different types of things depending on what you're studying. Now, I don't know if you've talked about this much in your previous coursework, but if you have two groups that you're studying, you really do want to look at their descriptive statistics and look and run an analysis to see that they're the same, right? Because if you're giving them two different interventions, or if one is in control, you want those two groups to be the same prior to your intervention. So then that way you can say that the intervention is the thing that made changes and not the differences between your two groups. And then what you'll do is, so you'll start with your descriptive statistics, and then you'll explain that, and then you'll work your way down to your inferential statistics. And you'll want to list out each one that you'll be using. You do want to make sure that you discuss the assumptions for each test. So let's say you're doing a correlation analysis, and you can note that if you have a normal distribution, you'll be using the Pearson, but then if it's not normally distributed, then it's a Spearman-Rowe, those types of things. If you're doing t-tests, make sure that you are including the assumptions for those tests. And also if you're doing then a linear logistic regression. So again, using that manual and your textbook from last year will really help you to know what you're putting in here. You also want to make sure that you are including your clinical relevance, and how do you determine it? So for myself in physical therapy, we have a lot of outcome measures where MDCs have been calculated already for a certain population. You might be using, I think a lot of times you might see Cohen's D for an effect size. So if you use something like that, or how are you going to determine if your analysis would be clinically relevant, you want to make sure that you cite what you're doing. So if you're using Cohen's D, you would use, you're determining an effect size based off of the work of Cohen's work, and then you would cite that. You also want to make sure that you are noting what software program that you will use to analyze your data. You do cite that in a parentheses, but it does not go into your reference list. You want to note significance level. I will say that I don't want to get too in the weeds, but most of the time you guys will be using one primary objective. So a lot of times your significance level will be probably 0.05. But if you have two primary objectives or aims, then you drop that significance down to 0.025. So again, talk with your statistical person for that, but just realize if you have one primary objective versus two. And then you also want to make sure if you're noting if it's one-tailed versus two-tailed t-tests. And then you would, again, format it within APA guidelines. Make sure you do the title page, your references section. I would recommend that you look back at other dissertation proposals to see how they formatted them. It's always nice to have some examples. Please reference your dissertation manual to help you with some of this. I'm really been excited to read your guys' work. I just love how it's all coming together. So please reach out if you have any questions, and have a wonderful week.